Hey everyone, Kevin P. McAuliffe here, and I'm back again with another Let's Edit with Media Composer tutorial. And I know that in the previous lesson I said that we were going to talk about settings. But I got a great question in the comments section of the last lesson, basically not really understanding why you shouldn't link and edit with media. All right? And I sort of explained it a little bit, but in this lesson, we're really going to get down to probably the most important lesson you'll ever learn when it comes to Media Composer. And that is consolidation versus transcoding, what they are and when you should use either one of them in your workflows. And I also get in and explain why you should never edit with linked media and how it really came about in Media Composer to begin with. All right. If you've been watching this tutorial series and you do enjoy the lessons, please do me a favor and like, subscribe, and share these lessons across social media. If you are on Facebook, if you are on LinkedIn, you see these posts come up, please share them, like them, comment on them. I appreciate all your feedback, positive or negative. And with that, let's jump into Media Composer and let's get started. All right, now one thing I am going to encourage you to do before we get rolling in this lesson is head on over to mediaarea.net to download MediaInfo. Now I know that this looks like it's some sort of a scam website with all kinds of links to click on, all this type of stuff. But to be honest, MediaInfo is one of the best tools that you will have, especially if you're an assistant starting out. You need to get more information about a specific clip, whether it's codecs, whether it's, you know, what's going on with the raster dimension, the frame rate. You can get all of that information from MediaInfo. Now it's available for both Mac and Windows. So make sure you head on over and download it, and it will work one of two ways. Now, right here you can see on Windows, I have two clips here. Now, these are actually both the same clip. What I've just done is I've encoded one as ProRes. Well, actually, it came as a ProRes file from cinestudy.org. And the other one I just flipped over to an MP4 file, and you're going to understand a little bit more about why I've done this coming up later in this lesson. But you'll notice that what I have the ability to do is to hover over any clip that's a media clip, and it will give me all kinds of information about the clip. You'll see here, I can even see everything from the bit rate of the clip to the raster dimension 1920 to the aspect ratio to the frame rate to what codec is being used, as well as the audio. Same thing as I hover over any of these other clips here. Now what I also have the ability to do is to right click on that clip and say Media Info, so I can get this window here. Now, as you can see, a new version is available. I'm not going to download it, but what this then gives you the ability to do, and I can't tell you how many times I've been in this situation where I have a producer, a camera op sending me stuff and saying, oh, well, I sent it to you like this, blah, 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 blah. I can literally just take a snapshot of this window and send it back and say, sorry, the file that I have is a ProRes file. It's an MP4 file. It's a whatever type of file. This is what you sent me, so this is what we're working with, because MediaInfo doesn't lie, which is what I love about the application. All right, so head on over, download MediaInfo, completely free for both Mac and Windows. What I tell Mac users to do is don't download the one from the App Store, download the one from the website. I believe the functionality is actually different between the two of them. Now, I need to talk about another concept that is something that is exceptionally important to understand when we're going to talk about consolidation versus transcoding. And that is, what is a container and what is a codec? They are two completely different ideas that you need to understand because people will use them as though they are the same thing. For example, someone will say, what type of file is that? And they'll say, well, it's a .mov file. Well, no, it's not a .mov file. It's actually a ProRes file. What you always should be referring to is the codec of the file. The codec is what is the encoding method of that file. So for example, with this clip here, you can see it is a ProRes file. I can actually see it listed right there. It's a ProRes codec that lives inside a .mov container. All the container does is just hold the video file that's going to live inside it. The same concept here. This file is I believe it's a .mp4 file. It's an h.264.mp4 file. Remember, the container is .mp4. The codec that it's encoded with is h.264. So what you need to do is to start referring to clips as the codec that they are, so people will know. And you also in Media Composer won't get confused with the workflow that I'm about to show you, because it's something that's very, very important to understand the difference. So container is the .mov, it's the extension. It's what holds the file, the container. The actual codec is what the file has been encoded as. It's been encoded as XDCAM or ProRes or H.264 or anything like that. So keep those two concepts in mind. Now, when we're talking about Avid Media Composer, the container that we are referring to is a .mxf file. You'll hear MXF files being, that idea being thrown around. MXF is just the container. It can contain a DNxHD file. It can contain a DNxHR file. It can even contain a ProRes file. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that coming up. But before I do that, what I want to talk about is what is an Avid-friendly codec. All right, now there's a great document. I'm just going to pull it out over here called the Avid Supported Video File Formats document. I'm just going to double click on it. I'm going to put a link to it in the notes below this lesson here. And what this represents is what is an Avid-friendly codec and what is not an Avid-friendly codec. Now, what does that mean exactly? Well, inside of Media Composer, we have the ability to do one of two things. We can take footage that's brought in, and we can convert it specifically to an Avid-friendly codec. All right? So what does that mean? Well, for example, that H.264 MP4 file, that is what is called a non-Avid-friendly codec, meaning I can link to it, I can play it back, but if I want to convert it to Avid Media, I will need to transcode it. Now, a transcode is basically taking the file and recompressing it as an Avid file, an MXF file that would be in an Avid codec that would live in our Avid Media Files folder. Now, we're familiar with the Avid Media Files folder. We talked about it a couple lessons ago. That is the folder on your drive, and let me actually just call it up here. Hold on one second. There we go. I'm just going to bring this window over. You can see we have our Avid Media Files folder here inside MXF. Inside one, you'll see that we have these different folders or these different files here that represent files that have been transcoded into an Avid-friendly file for us to work with. Now, you'll notice that as I hover over again, I'm given the MediaInfo tooltips. And again, these are files that are in an MXF container, but chances are they're DNx HD files. Actually, as you can see right here with the one that I'm hovering over, this is actually a ProRes file living inside of an MXF container. Now, I know this concept is a little bit tricky, and it's going to be a little bit more self-explanatory when we go into Media Composer and I show you how this actually works. But what this document actually refers to is which codecs have the ability to, instead of being retranscoded, which adds a layer of compression to them, can they simply be rewrapped as an MXF file? So what does that mean? Well, let me give you an example. So I have this file here on the desktop. It's a ProRes file. Now, ProRes is an Avid-friendly codec. Now, an Avid-friendly codec means that what I have the ability to do is to work with it natively in Media Composer. So what I have the ability to do is to bring this clip in. I can then take it. I can lift the ProRes codec file, the file that was encoded as ProRes, out of the .mov container, open up an MXF container, put that ProRes file in it, and stick it in the Avid Media Files folder. No recompression has happened. Now, we really worried about compression long ago when, compression technologies weren't really that great. And after you went through a couple compression passes, things would start to look really questionable as far as quality. I mean, these days, you can re-encode a ProRes file a whole bunch of times before you'd even start to even notice any quality degradation in the footage. Okay? Now, what this document actually does is if I scroll down, you'll see native formats are purple, non-native formats are blue. These can be rewrapped as MXF files. These ones cannot. Now, the one that I always use as a good example is red. A red file is a file that you can link to it. You can attempt to play it back. It's not really going to play back in real time. But I don't have the ability to rewrap a red file in an MXF container. I have to transcode it. So what this basically means, we can rewrap, we have to transcode. So again, this document is going to give you a really good insight. You'll notice XAVC, XDCAM, these are all Avid friendly. Even AVI back there, look at that. AVIs can be rewrapped. QuickTime files depending on the codec that's being used. You'll see all Avid DNX HD, QuickTime, all codecs. You'll notice as we get down here, we have some, PNG, QT files cannot be rewrapped, have to be retranscoded. All right. I'm not going to worry about stereoscopic. We really don't worry too much about stereoscopic these days. That was sort of something from years ago. But I like to use this document as a bit of a guideline. Now I'm going to talk sort of about, the most common type of high resolution file you're going to get is really going to be an Avid DNX HD or Avid DNX HR or ProRes. Then you kind of have everything else. All right. So a lot of the start of this lesson has really been theory, and until we actually get into Media Composer and I show you how this actually works in practice, it's going to be a little bit confusing. But what I normally encourage people to do is don't actually try to do as I'm doing. Watch the whole lesson through first, take as much as you can, and then go back and watch this first part because it's going to make much more sense. Now, let us go into Media Composer and I will show you what I mean. Now, we're really going to focus on two clips. We're going to focus on our CineStudy raw footage. What I'm going to do is actually just call this ProRes, just so we can keep track of it, because I've called the other one H.264, so we can keep track, all right? Now, one thing I didn't do in my previous lesson, which I should have done, was I should have shown you the quick and simple way to bring clips in by linking to them without actually having to go to the source browser. And I talked about the hard way and the easy way, and I showed the hard way, but I really should have shown the easy way. So let me show you that right now. All I'm going to do is simply drag the Media Composer interface over here to the right. I'm going to take these files, I'm going to Alt or Option and drag them into a bin, and they'll link automatically, just like such. All right, now I'm just going to drag my name column over just so we can see what the two of these are, so that there's no confusion when we're working. All right, now I had a great question in the previous lesson. Now let me actually just call up that question here. There we go. Perfect. What I'm going to do is just drag the window over here. There we go. And the question came from @DeepTravel. And @DeepTravel said, I don't understand. If we're not supposed to edit with linked media, why would we use linked media? What would we use it for? Why is it even there? That is a fantastic question. Probably one of the most common questions I get asked when it comes to linking to media inside of Media Composer. So let me just quickly explain why we're going to do this. So let's talk about 10 years ago. 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. About 15 years ago, everything was what I'll call linear. All right? Let's look at Media Composer. You had Media Composer, you had a VTR beside you, a tape deck. You basically played the tape, you digitized into Media Composer. That is how you got all of your footage into Media Composer, and that's how you got all your footage out of Media Composer. Basically bring in all the raw footage, digitize it, create clips out of it. That's MXF media or OMF media back in the day that lived in your Avid Media Files folder. Do all your editing. You would import any music that came from a CD. You would import any graphics that were sent to you. Import potentially any voiceovers or anything like that that was sent to you. So you would have the import window for that task, digitizing for getting footage in. You would then output back to tape to do your output. Then, thanks to our good friend George Lucas, the digital revolution began with cameras like the Red camera, Arri Alexa cameras, and the issue that Media Composer had was there was no way to get this footage that was larger than the largest project size it could work in, which at the time, which was HD. There was no way to get these 6K and 8K frame sizes into Media Composer for us to work with. All right, now, the reason that the source browser and the linking capability came into play to begin with was only to serve one purpose. It was to bring footage in that was larger than HD at the time so that we could then transcode it to an Avid codec that we could work with it at, and we could then do all our edits, and assuming that it was going to be finished at 4K or whatever, we would then take our AAF file, we would export it to an application like Resolve that could work with all this footage natively, and everything was good to go. Now, what's important to also keep in mind about the source browser is that for the most part, with the source browser and linking to capabilities, once they were implemented, they were really never improved on. All right, they were improved on a little bit. We had, thumbnail dragging that I showed you in the previous lesson, things like that. But the capability of linking was never really updated to the point where it was designed to ever be something that you would link to footage and edit with. Because the functionality was only ever really streamlined for you to get the footage in, to transcode it to Avid Media for you to work with. Now, what's important to keep in mind about Media Composer is that's what it excels at. It excels at media management. It excels at the fact that once you transcode media, assuming you're working with a drive that's capable of it, you transcode it to the proper codec, you will never have a problem with playback in real time inside of Avid Media Composer. That is really what Media Composer excels at. All right? So that is why with linking to, I tell editors, once you link to it, get it to something that you're going to actually work with. Either transcode that footage or consolidate that footage so that you can then work with it. All right, so I hope that answers @DeepTravel's question. It was basically implemented, never really improved on, never designed to work that way. We were always designed to work with actual Avid Media in our Avid Media Files folder. All right, so let's get back to this concept here. ProRes H.264. One is Avid friendly. Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to call that Avid friendly, and I don't really have the color red, so I'm going to give it yellow. Avid friendly is green. Avid non-friendly is yellow. All right, so the question is, how do we take a file like this ProRes file, and we take it and we rewrap it inside of Media Composer, so we're not transcoding it to add another compression pass. We're just working with the ProRes file living inside of an MXF container. Here's how you do it. Inside of Media Composer, that concept is called consolidation. Now, consolidation in Media Composer serves two purposes. I'm only talking about one of them right now. All right? We're talking about the concept of taking an Avid-friendly codec, one of those purple files that we saw in that PDF document, and I want to rewrap it as an MXF file. So how am I going to go about doing this? Let me show you. I'm going to select this clip. I'm going to right-click, and you'll notice that Consolidate and Transcode are basically considered one topic because it's really done from within the same window. So I'm going to select Consolidate Transcode, and you'll notice that I have a whole bunch of options here. All right. You'll notice that I have the Extreme SSD, Media 1, and Media 3. I'm going to select Media 1. I normally always start. Let's pick the drive first before we worry about anything else. We always want audio and video to go on the same drive. The next question is, what do you want to do? Do you want to consolidate? And you'll notice that if I hover over, I actually get a quick tip telling me what Media Composer is going to do when it consolidates, or I can transcode. So let's consolidate this clip. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to consolidate only linked media. It really makes no difference because I only have linked media selected. I'm going to delete the original media files when done. Now, normally people are like, oh my God, don't delete my media. That's not what I want. That's not what Media Composer is actually referring to. What it means is that it's actually going to delete the linked clip that was brought in once it's converted to an actual Avid MXF file. Or I say converted, I mean rewrapped as an Avid MXF file. All right, I'm just going to say delete. I'm going to skip media files already in the target drive. I'm not even going to do anything else, and I'm going to say go. Now remember, this clip is, I don't even know actually how big this clip is. I think it's HD, and it's 4 minutes long, all right? So I'm going to say go. Now remember, this is a rewrap, and look how fast it's going, okay? All it's doing, lifting that ProRes file out, dropping it into an MXF container, and it's done. And you'll notice now that this is now an actual master clip for me to work with. I can double-click on it. I can hit play.
Every day, working with
real-time playback, no issues. So how do I know exactly what Media Composer has done? Let me show you. What I'm going to do is just minimize out of Media Composer. This clip here, I'm just going to right-click, and I'm going to get its properties. Its properties here are about 5 gigs big. So with that said, the file that was just made should roughly be about 5 gigs. Remember, that's considering the video and audio as one file. Inside of Media Composer, it will actually break it down. But let's take a look now at what's actually happened inside of my Avid Media Files folder. What I'm going to do is just come down to my File Explorer. I'm going to go to Media 1. I'm going to go into Avid Media Files, into MXF, into 1, and I'm going to sort by the date because I know today's date is the 20th of October. And you will notice in here that I have one video file that is 5 gigs big and 2 audio files that go with it that are, obviously considerably smaller, 23 megabytes. But so you can see what's happened here is that that file has been taken and it hasn't been retranscoded. It's been rewrapped as basically a ProRes file, and you can see it right there as I hover over. A ProRes file now living in an MXF container. And the most important part about this whole process is that I know this is actually an internal drive, it's not an external drive, but I know that with the speed of this drive, I can hit play on that clip. I'm not going to have any issues playing this clip back. None whatsoever. All right. So now let's talk about the process of what happens when you're dealing with a clip that is a non-Avid friendly codec, or one of those blue clips that you saw in the PDF document. Now, the beauty part about Media Composer is that if I attempt to consolidate this clip the same way that I just consolidated the ProRes file, you'll see I'll leave everything the way that it is and I'll say go. Now, because this is an MP4 file with an H.264 codec inside of it, you'll see all clips were skipped during the operation. See the console for details. Now, it's going to tell me, I don't actually need to see the console, some of the items for Consolidate contained foreign compression types, non-Avid friendly codecs, which could not be consolidated. To consolidate these clips, please transcode them. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click. I'm going to head right back to the same window. Okay. Consolidate transcode. The only difference is that when we get rolling, obviously the drive's the same. I'm going to switch over to transcode. Now, at this point, a decision has to be made. All right. When we consolidated the other clip, the ProRes file, we didn't change its quality. It's still a ProRes file. It's still high quality. Now, this is where you can start to run into issues if you're not paying attention to what you're doing. All right. You might need to bring in a clip, a ProRes file at HD quality that's a 4K file that somebody gave you. Okay. That's 3 hours long and the file is like terabytes big. You attempt to consolidate that clip, you're going to run into problems because remember, Media Composer can work in larger than HD projects. You're going to attempt to consolidate or rewrap a 4K 3 hour long ProRes file, you're going to run into problems. So what you have to then decide is, well, is ProRes 4K really the best quality I need to work with? Maybe I need to decide to transcode at a bit of a lower resolution. I'm not saying the quality is going to be bad, but this is where decisions have to be made. Am I working in an offline scenario? Then consolidation is completely out the window. There is no more consolidating when it comes to offline workflows. If you're going to be doing an offline workflow, you will always be transcoding your media. If you're working in only an online scenario, let's say you went out and shot a bunch of stuff, you just want to come back, put together a 30-second little thing to then, put on the web, you're always going to be working in high res. Consolidate your footage if you can, assuming the file sizes are not too big or too long, and do it that way. So for example, in this case, I'm going to give you two examples of how we can do this. One at an online resolution, one at an offline resolution. So the first option that we have, again, transcode only linked media. To be honest, I'm normally selecting the clips that I want to transcode, so this checkbox is really irrelevant. Raster dimension. Now, this clip might be larger than HD. I have the ability to transcode it and work with it in this project. Because I know that this clip is only HD and I know that my project is HD, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to come down and I'm going to transcode it at the project's dimensions. Now, what this also gives you the flexibility to do by working this way is, let's say you brought in a UHD clip, 3840 by 2160, still 16 by 9, but you only want to work with it at HD quality. By doing this, project dimensions, it will take the file and it will shrink it down to be the raster dimension of the project when it transcodes it. If you don't want that flexibility, let's say maybe later, or actually if you want better flexibility, and let's say later you want to switch over to a UHD project to output, always transcode it at the source's original dimensions. Then it will transcode it at UHD or whatever file size it happens to be. All right. So target video resolution, this is the big one. Low res offline quality is always DNX HR or DNX HD low bandwidth. Okay. You'll notice DNX HR is the option I have to choose from, and I'm going to simply select that one. Low bandwidth is always what you want. That would be 36 megabits per second. All right. Now, the reason that I don't have DNX HD in here is because right here you'll see that I chose to keep the source's frame rate. Now, by doing that, Media Composer makes the assumption of, I don't know what the frame rate is, I don't really care, I'm just going to leave it whatever it is. Doesn't matter. And to do that, you need to work in DNxHR. DNxHR is Avid's codec to work with any resolution, any frame rate, however you want your project. Helter skelter. It's like the Wild West of working. However, if I'm going to lock things down and say, nope, I know that the footage is 23976, I know my project is 23976, we'll convert that to the project's frame rate, and then we get our DNxHD codecs. Now, to be perfectly honest, I normally always keep everything at the source's frame rate, and I just choose DNxHR low bandwidth. This way, you pick one. DNxHR is now the standard for Media Composer. It's understood by Resolve, it's understood by Scratch, it's understood by pretty much every other application out there. All right. So normally stick with, if you're doing a low resolution offline, DNxHR low bandwidth, you'll keep the source's frame rate. You know what I'm going to do in this case? I'm just going to keep the source's dimensions. Why not? All right. This way it'll give us a good comparison with our consolidation that was what it was. All right. Linked source scaling quality will leave us full. I'm just going to leave these checked for now. We're going to talk more about them in an upcoming lesson. But for right now, I'm just going to apply source transformations. And all I'm going to do is say transcode. Now, you'll notice that this process is a lot slower than the consolidation process. This is a re-encode, not a rewrap. All right. Now, once it's done, I want to show you the file size difference between a online, I'm using that in my Dr. Evil air quotes, and an offline quality. All right. So there you go. That was still pretty good for 4 minutes. Okay. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to head back here and I'm going to take a look, and you'll see now that the difference in the video file size is basically, it's like 1 gig compared to 5 gigs. All right. 5.3 gigs versus 1.01 gigs. And the funny thing is that if you take a look, okay, you know, for quality purposes here, what I'm actually going to do is I'll just switch over to a single monitor here. And we'll drop it into a timeline just so that we can see it. There we go. The quality is actually pretty darn good. And that's the purpose of the offline. We still want to keep the quality good.
Use the word internship.
Definitely not broadcast quality, but still pretty darn good. Now let me show you how we're going to do a high resolution transcode. And the best part is it's pretty much exactly the same thing. All right. I'm going to select my clip. Again, I can go do it from here, Consolidate Transcode, or we can right click and say Consolidate Transcode. And exactly the same thing. The only difference here, DNxHR, and I'm going to choose HRHQ, high quality. Okay. I'm not going to go with 10-bit. We don't need to go that crazy. And I'm going to say transcode. Now you'll notice the transcode time is really exactly the same. And you'll notice that when I transcoded this, it didn't delete the linked clip. Now, that is for the purposes of relinking later on, but we're not going to talk about that in this lesson. I just want to show you the quality difference, again, in our Avid Media Files folder. There we go. Video to audio files, perfect. And you'll now see that what we have is basically, the funny thing is it's even slightly bigger than the original file, but basically this now matches what the quality was of the ProRes file. But you'll notice that if I hover over it, this file is now actually let's see if I can get the MediaInfo to work. There we go. This clip is actually a DNxHRHQ codec clip. So you'll see it's a little bit different than our ProRes file that's right here. That is an Apple ProRes HQ file. Quality pretty much exactly the same, but two different codec types. So the question is, which is right for you? Well, I'm going to break it down for you very quickly in the end right here. So first of all, if you just want to come in, you've got, let's just say you got 30 ProRes clips that are all like a minute or less. You just want to work with them at the highest quality. You want to link to them. And what you're going to do is you're simply going to right click. You're going to come to Consolidate Transcode. You'll choose Consolidate, and it's going to rewrap those ProRes files as MXF files in your Avid Media Files folder. It's basically going to drop them into your bin, and you're good to go at high quality. All right. If you're working with a bunch of Avid non-friendly codecs, again, H.264, codecs like that, anything that comes up as blue in that document that I'm going to link to, what you want to make sure of is that when you come in here to this window, select Transcode, make sure you come to the source's dimensions, choose source dimensions based on what you shot on. Because remember, you could be shooting on a camera that's shooting in a different 4K resolution than what the project is you're working on, but you still want to work with it. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the next lesson. And what you want to make sure of is, depending on the quality that you want to use, you're either going to be using low bandwidth for offline, doing a documentary, doing an hour-long TV show, something like that. DNX HR low bandwidth. Anything that you just want to get in, do it high quality, and then output, DNX HR HQ. All right. That's our crash course to consolidating and transcoding. Now we're going to talk a lot more about it as we go along, because you're going to see that once we start bringing in footage to work on different things, I'll be going back over this again and again. But this primer is probably the most important lesson you need to understand when working in Media Composer. What is the difference between consolidation and transcode? Consolidation rewraps, transcode re-encodes. Remember, with that document, purple is a consolidation, blue is a transcode. This then also, if you're doing transcode, you need to understand which is the better resolution for you to work with. If it's offline, it's DNX HR low bandwidth. If it's online, it's DNX HR HQ. All right, so I hope this lesson, and I know it was a lot, is going to be one that you're going to keep in your back pocket. Go over it again and again until you have the understanding of the difference between the two and the quality that you're going to want to encode at. If you found this lesson useful, please, please, please like, subscribe, and share it across social. If you're on LinkedIn and you see me post this, please share it. We want to get the word out there to everybody, so if they run into this problem in Media Composer, if they're coming from Premiere, they're coming from Resolve, and they don't quite understand why things aren't working the way that they wanted to, this could very well be the issue right here. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to send them to me at kevinpmcauliffe@gmail.com. Thanks a lot for watching.